Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. A former Red Bull engineer who worked with Sebastian Vettel for his 4 World Championship titles between 2010 and 2013 has stated that Verstappen is still very weak technically compared to Sebastian Vettel, and stating that he needs to improve significantly along those lines to become a more complete driver. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always. Plenty to discuss today. Firstly, quick mention on Nico Hulkenberg. Apparently this is now a done deal. The rumour has it right now, according to a Greek reporter, that, well, the translation I believe goes as follows, effectively says this: Nico Hulkenberg to Haas is almost a done deal. It would take a miracle for Mick to keep his seat for 2023. That is effectively the implication of what he is saying, and we expect that announcement to happen tomorrow. That was the rumour a few days ago. Might not occur, though, along those lines. Let's dive into these statements then made by Rocky, as he is known, because of his surname Rockelan, who still is working with Red Bull, but was several years ago the former engineer for Sebastian Vettel during that period of dominance that they had. Now, Verstappen obviously has drove in pretty imperious manner this season, has just been unbelievably quick in pretty much all circumstances, also been crazy consistent with his lap times and saving tyres and just leading from the front and carving through the field when absolutely necessary. However, Rockelan believes he can still get better and is actually pretty weak, especially compared to Vettel, in one major area where other drivers definitely, often talk about these type of situations that happen behind closed doors and behind the scenes. So this is the full quote here, as Rockelan says to a recent podcast: I think Sebastian was a more complete driver than Max when he arrived with us at the professional level. Technique, mediation, he was trained at the Schumacher school, who was his idol. He asked a lot of questions, took a lot of notes. When he arrived with us, he was very thorough. It is no coincidence that he won several titles. He was more prepared technically and mentally. I think Max maybe had more natural talent. That's what he relied on the most, but Sebastian was the most complete. Max has always been the boss. He has enormous self-confidence, he knows what he wants, and he is very direct. But I'll be honest, Max is weak technically compared to other drivers that we have worked with. I still think he has a lot of progress to make. Very interesting statements, and we'll come back to more of them in a second once we kind of close out the comments here. What struck me the most this season in 2022 was that kind of Verstappen lost that desperate hunger that it kind of felt like he had, especially at the end of last season. He's matured, he's gained consistency, winning the championship has given him a lot of confidence, he drives in a different way, there's no single trigger, something more progressive. There were several stages. He started F1 very young with great ambition, perhaps not the maturity that went with it. He also started at Toro Rosso, which perhaps had less stature and experience. Then the stages began when he arrived at Red Bull. More confidence with the team, good record, closer to his goal. He won a race immediately with us at Spain, which allowed him to take a step forward. Gradually, won more races, developed link with engineers, etc., etc. So these statements probably the most interesting ones, that Vettel was far more, look, at the end of the day, Vettel's German, Schumacher's German. That's kind of the way that they do things to some degree. Took a lot of notes, very thorough, discussing a lot with the team. So on a technical level, very engaged with the engineers and the car and the preparation, all this type of stuff. Some drivers are like Vettel and like Schumacher in that way. Other drivers are not. They rely more on instinct and, lateral talent, as he is suggesting. And he reckons that he could get even better Verstappen if he kind of took on a more Vettel-esque persona, and maybe feels like in his time with Verstappen that he was kind of more like, you do whatever with the car, like, I'll make it work on the track, rather than being as well prepared mentally and technically as others were. And he's probably looking at Max. Okay, he's got his 2 world titles, Vettel got 4. Can Max keep up that consistency over the next couple of years if he doesn't have quite this technical level that Vettel has, let's just say. So pretty interesting statements. Just to mention real quick who this guy actually is, Rockelan. I'm not going to try and pronounce the first name, unfortunately. I'm not particularly good at pronouncing names at the best of times, but he was the engineer of 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel. Was his engineer between 2009 and 2014. He was actually Coulthard's engineer before that, and then for about a 5-6 year period was Vettel's engineer during that 4-year, consecutive dominant victories. Then he went to the head of race engineering and has actually been on track with them since then. So he's seen Verstappen from 2015, 2016 all the way through to the present day. He's actually most recently not been at the track. He's actually been helping the development of drivers in the junior team since April 2022. So his last race trackside was the 2022 Australian Grand Prix. So and that was the 3rd race of the season, right? So there's a chance that since then, Verstappen has kind of come on a little bit more in these technical senses that he hasn't necessarily seen. But look, he certainly believes that's still the case to a certain degree. And yes, he's probably, biased in some degree towards Vettel because they've got that great relationship. But, it's still interesting comments nonetheless. Now, this is something that is kind of well known about Vettel anyway. I think a lot of drivers say this and know this, that Vettel, a very thorough guy, very well prepared. And if there's someone that Verstappen is you know, probably the worst person to get compared to in the modern day on kind of your technical ability is probably going to be Sebastian Vettel, right? If there's a guy that's, you know, as committed and thorough and well prepared, Vettel's kind of the gold standard in the modern era, let's just say. And we know that guys like Lewis Hamilton and others, even Hamilton has talked about it, the fact that George Russell, the kind of conversations and the relationships there with his engineers aren't quite as well developed as Hamilton's are with his engineers, and the risks that he's willing to take in practice to kind of get prepared for different setups for qualifying are more than maybe Russell's willing to take. And that comes down to maybe greater technical understanding and knowledge and just experience along those lines. But pretty interesting that Vettel, from effectively as soon as he came into the team, was along those lines and was behaving like that, whereas Verstappen has not really got that part of his arsenal. Now the question is, does he need that element to his arsenal, right? Because Red Bull seemingly as a team are very competent anyway, even if Verstappen isn't maybe, you know, he's maybe not staying at the garage until 10 p.m. every night to make sure everything is how he wants it to be. He's maybe slightly more happy to dip out, you know, come back the next day and just make it work with whatever he's got. And obviously that's working for him very well. But the question has been, will that hold him back in terms of consistency? When Mercedes have a very quick car, of course, Mercedes are very motivated right now. You know, is Verstappen the character that once he's on top, he's going to take the foot off the gas to some degree from those technical aspects where Vettel didn't during his 4-year period of dominance? So I think that's a question that's being raised here. But interesting nonetheless to think that, you know, Verstappen still has certain elements behind the scenes that he can actually improve and get even better, because right now he's obviously driving like the best driver on the grid. The other thing to mention here in terms of Verstappen getting even better is the compounds for next season. So Pirelli, of course, are working on next year's tyres. Now, Verstappen has given feedback on this year's tyres, saying they tend to give up a lot mid-corner and don't quite have the front grip that he wants them to have. Now, I'm hoping really that Pirelli have taken on, you know, feedback from across the grid on this, and this is kind of like a grid-wide phenomenon that they think, yeah, the front tyres aren't always so good this season as they have been in the past. But Verstappen, as we well know, loves a very pointy front end. It means, you know, a car that has oversteer and understeer. When he turns the wheel, the car at the front does what he wants it to do. And when the Red Bull started doing that this season, that's when he pulled a massive gap on Perez, who was pretty close in the first few races. So Verstappen has said, look, give me some more front grip, Pirelli. And I imagine the other drivers have agreed with this. I wonder if there's kind of a list of things the drivers would like to see changed. And I'm sure Pirelli are going to try and do as many as they possibly can. But apparently they are very eager to solve these front end grip options or issues that can happen with these current tyres that Verstappen has been complaining about. So pretty interesting, right? If they develop these tyres to have more front end grip, which could even make Verstappen better in future seasons as well, if that's less of an issue than it has been before. Then again, how good are Pirelli's tyres in general? Probably not great. So can they actually solve these issues? That's a question that's going to be raised there regardless. But, you know, tyre compounds and stuff, always a topic that is ongoing. Quick couple of notes here. Firstly, on the Red Bull side as well, with Alfa Tauri, formerly Toro Rosso, of course, where many drivers in the Red Bull Academy got their starting point. They're not looking to sell this team, they say, for now. There's been some talks about this. I think even Tomo did a video where he said that he reckons Red Bull are going to get rid of them. So they say for now they're not looking to sell them, but often, you know, you get asked questions in interviews and you say, no, absolutely no chance. But in reality, there might be discussions going on. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. And just to mention this before we go into the final double header of this championship, that Red Bull have already won the constructors, of course, but Ferrari and Mercedes are about 40 points apart from each other. There's a chance that Mercedes can close the gap, but it's going to be pretty tough to see. This is where the real battles are, though, courtesy here of Code F1. Alpine, McLaren, 7 points in that for the last 2 rounds. Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, 4 points in that. Haas, Alfa Tauri, 1 point in that battle going into the final couple of rounds. So lots to be determined in terms of P2, P4, P6, and P8 in this year's championship. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.